Imagine spending years alone, buried under memory and grief, until one frozen night someone pounds on your door. Not your wife, but her sister, battered and terrified, running from a cruel man. With every secret she spills and every threat closing in, you get pulled into a world of danger, grit, and hard-earned justice. Maybe you can keep her safe. Maybe you can outrun the ghosts that never quite left and carve out something new together. Ghosts don't always drag chains, friend. Sometimes they knock 3 times on a December night so cold it freezes the spit in your mouth. When I opened that door, I was staring straight into the face of my dead wife. Eliza Maddox. Her silk dress, soaked dark with blood, was finer than anything this ranch had ever seen. That's how she found me. Deep in a Wyoming winter, cold slicing like a blade, snow piled high past the fence posts, while I drifted in dreams of Eliza. 6 years since we buried her, and still I could recall our wedding down to the smallest detail. The way she smiled, the way she breathed life into everything around her. I was still lost in that memory when the knocking came again. Sharp, frantic, cutting through my thoughts faster than a rattlesnake strike. I staggered to the door in flannel pants and boots, lamp in hand, figuring it was some poor soul lost in the storm. I opened it, and there she was. Eliza's face. But something was wrong. Her breath trembled in the frozen air. For a second, I figured the whiskey had finally rotted my brain, or maybe God was playing one hell of a cruel joke. But it wasn't Eliza. It was her twin. Ayanna. A woman I'd only ever known through letters, standing on my porch with wide blue eyes full of fear. Bruises ringed her neck like a necklace of dark purple blooms, her lips pale from the cold. She kept glancing past me into the dark, like something was already inside the cabin, and whispered that someone was coming for her. She told me her name was Ayanna, but for 3 days, my mind kept calling her Eliza. Her reddish-brown hair caught the morning light the same way my wife's used to. Even the way she held a tin cup, like the warmth might slip away if she didn't grip it tight enough. The way she moved through my cabin felt like an echo, like Eliza had come back from the grave just to set things right. She cleaned, rearranged, turned my bachelor mess into something that almost resembled a home. But the bruises told a different story, one I couldn't ignore. I'd seen marks like that before, handprints from someone trying to choke the life out of another human being, split lips still healing, burns around her wrists from rope or wire. Every inch of her spoke of a man who meant to break her, and somehow I felt that weight like it was mine to carry. She told me her husband's name. Silas Kane. Owned half the freight lines and warehouses out of Chicago. Rich, ruthless. The wind rattled the shutters like it was trying to remind me just how alone I'd been. Then Ayanna started talking. Really talking. Every blow, every threat, the constant watch of servants and those black spurs he kept close. Each word landed like a punch to the chest. A quiet kind of horror. It started with a slap over a cold dinner, turned into shoves in front of business partners, ended with locked doors and whispered threats. Ayanna clutched the quilt Eliza had sewn our first winter together, a piece of the past I never had the heart to put away. She leaned in close and whispered that Silas had killed a young maid, Lila, who tried to help her escape, pushed her down the stairs and called it an accident. When Ayanna confronted him, he nearly finished what he started. Every story got worse, showed just how far he'd go. But Ayanna wasn't just running, she'd planned it, calculated every step. She poisoned his whiskey, emptied his safe, took the first train west with a journal packed full of proof. Names, dates, bribes, written neat and careful, like it was a cookbook instead of a ledger of crimes. I told her he'd come after her. She met my eyes. Those same fierce blue eyes as Eliza's, but sharper now, hardened by survival. That's when I knew no man had the right to lay a hand on a woman in anger, and I told her she could stay as long as she needed. Days passed. January bled into February, and I stopped flinching every time she moved close. While I worked the cattle, she rebuilt my cabin. Cooking, mending clothes, filling the silence with soft old songs I hadn't heard since I was a boy. Nights were harder. Ayanna would read by lamplight from books she brought from Chicago, her voice painting pictures of distant places, while the Wyoming wind howled outside like a pack of lonely spirits calling to one another. One night, the fire burned low, and the whiskey tasted like forgiveness. I took her to bed, shirts half buttoned, both of us pretending not to see the ghosts watching from the corners. Then the wind changed. It carried a sound that turned the blood cold. Silas Kane was coming. The warning came from Wade Carter, my closest neighbor, and one of the few men I trusted. He rode in at dawn, horse slick with sweat, face set like stone. Said a rich man from back east was searching for his sick wife. Described Ayanna to the letter, waving legal papers like a badge of authority. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might collapse. Wade said Silas had court orders, medical claims, said Ayanna needed to be locked away in an asylum, her eyes filled with fear. But her spirit didn't break. I could feel her fingers gripping my arm as I swore to her that I wouldn't let her vanish into one of those places where no one ever comes back. Ayanna had been beaten, hunted, nearly destroyed. But what stood in front of me now was something stronger. And I knew right then I'd fight for her, no matter the cost. Wade Carter studied the situation in silence, reading the truth plain across our faces. Ayanna wasn't crazy, just scared, bruised, and pushed too far. Her husband had hunted her, twisted her world, tried to break her spirit. But what stood there now wasn't a victim anymore. It was a woman who had made up her mind. She wasn't going back. Ayanna stepped forward, lifting her chin, voice steady as steel. We stand together. We fight this, side by side. I didn't hesitate. I knew what kind of road lay ahead. Bloody, unforgiving, but survival alone wasn't enough. Not anymore. This was about protecting her, and standing up to the man who thought he owned her life. Morning came hard and bright. The sun rose cold and merciless, glaring off the snow like a warning. I prepped the cattle, checked every strap and gate, loaded my Winchester, spun the chamber of my Colt .45, and made sure Ayanna knew exactly where the spare rounds were kept. Everything was set. That morning, she took my face in her hands, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "Come back to me," she whispered. I kissed her like it might be the last time, fear and truth shared between us in that single breath. Then she pressed something into my palm. Eliza Maddox's wedding ring, a charm, a memory, a promise. I stood on the porch, the ring biting into my skin through my pocket, watching dust rise in the valley like smoke from a prairie fire. Silas Kane was coming. He rode in slow, flanked by Grant Harker and a line of armed men, Kane riders at his back, each one carrying steel like it was just another piece of clothing. You could feel the weight of power rolling in with him before he even spoke. Then his voice carried across the distance, smooth, calm, and full of arrogance. "Cole Maddox, step aside. This doesn't have to turn ugly." He was still 50 yards out, and already the air felt heavier, like every word he spoke was meant to remind me he believed he owned everything, and everyone. His smile was clean. Perfect. but there was something rotten underneath it. I didn't move. My hand rested easy on the grip of my gun, my eyes locked on his. Silas wasn't used to that. Men usually folded before him. The fact that I didn't seemed to unsettle him more than the cold ever could. He tried a different angle. Started talking about Ayanna like she was unstable, claimed she needed treatment, said she belonged somewhere safe, locked away where she couldn't hurt herself. I didn't blink. Men like him always leaned on money and lies. But truth didn't bend that easy. Grant Harker shifted in his saddle, uneasy. He knew those papers Silas carried weren't worth the ink they were printed with. I measured distances, counted bodies, checked angles. Old ranger instincts kicking in. I'd seen men like Silas before. Men who believed fear was enough to keep people in line. Silas pulled out documents, warrants, ownership claims, legal threats dressed up as authority. Didn't matter. The snow crunched under my boots as I stepped forward, holding his gaze. Behind me, Ayanna stood wrapped in Eliza's quilt, her eyes burning, fear and resolve tangled together. The Wyoming wind howled through the trees, sharp and restless, like the land itself was waiting to see how this would end. Silas kept talking. I stopped listening, because out here, law didn't come from paper. It came from men willing to stand their ground. One of the cane riders shifted, hand drifting toward his gun. That was all it took. I moved. The Winchester cracked like thunder, the shot tearing through the valley and kicking up snow and dust at their feet. Silas's horse reared, nearly throwing him as he fought for control. And just like that, the balance shifted. Humiliated and burning with rage, Silas Kane sat rigid in the saddle. Then Ayanna stepped forward. Wrapped in Eliza Maddox's quilt, she held the spare Colt steady in her hand. There was something in her eyes now. Cold, sharp, unyielding. The kind of look that didn't come from fear, but from surviving it. She stood there not as prey, but as someone who had learned how to fight back. Silas froze. For the first time, he was looking at something he couldn't buy, couldn't threaten, couldn't bend. His control, gone. His power, useless. The frontier had stripped it all away. Ayanna took another step. "You don't own me," she said, her voice clear and cutting through the wind. "And you don't bury what you've done." Every word hit like a blade. She reached into her coat and pulled out the leather journal, holding it high for all to see. Inside it, every bruise, every threat, every bribe. Names of judges, paid men, witnesses bought and silenced. A map of corruption written in her own hand. The wind died down for a moment, like even the land was listening. Silas understood it then. He hadn't just lost Eliza's shadow. He had lost control, his reputation, the illusion that money could fix everything. Grant Harker shifted his stance, boots firm in the snow, eyes sharp. He knew how quickly this could turn deadly. Out here the law wasn't always written. It was enforced. And I wasn't about to let any man lay a hand on Ayanna again. She kept the gun low but steady, her breath shallow, sweat freezing along her brow. Her fingers trembled just enough to show she was human, but her resolve held firm. Every movement was measured, every second controlled. I lifted my rifle, not to fire, just enough to remind them I was ready. Silas Kane might have had money and influence back east. But here, in the Wyoming snow, grit and courage weighed heavier than gold. One of the Kane riders shifted, ready to step in. But one look at me, one look at Ayanna, and he backed off. They all knew it. One wrong move, and this would end in blood. The tension hung thick in the air. Snow crunched under boots. breath turned to frost. Every man stood on the edge of something final. Silas tried to speak again, talk about law, about order, about reason, but none of it held weight anymore. Not against truth, not against her. I watched him, remembering all the times this land had taught the same lesson. Justice didn't always come easy. Sometimes it had to be held in steady hands. Ayanna spoke again, stronger now, telling it all. How she gathered proof. How she survived every blow, every threat, every attempt to erase her. Her voice didn't shake this time. It carried. What once was pain had turned into power. I stayed beside her. Not in front, not behind. Just there. Because her strength wasn't mine to take. It was hers to wield. The world seemed to hold its breath. Minutes passed like hours. No one moved. No one wanted to be the first to break it. Power had shifted. Quiet, but undeniable. And Silas knew it. He'd lost, without a single bullet meant to kill. His pride cracked first, then his control, and finally, the truth showed plain across his face. He was powerless. Slowly I lowered my rifle, never taking my eyes off him. My breathing stayed even. Beside me, Ayanna eased her stance, just a fraction, but her eyes never softened. The danger wasn't gone, but it had changed. The wind picked up again, howling through the trees, sweeping across the snow like a reminder. This land answered to no man. And today, it had chosen justice. Silas Kane turned his horse at last. One by one, his men followed. And just like that, the storm broke. The tension drained from the valley, leaving only silence in its wake. Ayanna's strength finally gave way. She dropped to her knees in the snow, breath shaking, body spent. I was there before she hit the ground, catching her, holding her steady. "It's over," I said quietly. "You're safe now." She didn't answer, but she leaned into me. That night, the fire burned strong in the cabin, throwing warm light across our faces. Snow drifted down outside, soft and endless, and for the first time in a long while, there was peace. Not empty peace. Earned peace, the kind that comes after standing your ground. Winter began to loosen its grip as spring edged closer. The snow melted slow, giving way to the smell of fresh grass and something new on the wind. I stood watching the ranch stretch out under the morning light while Ayanna moved inside the cabin, reworking the shelves, setting things right like she'd always belonged there. She carried boxes, swept dust, fixed what needed fixing. And out in the fields, I went back to work, but nothing was the same anymore. Her hands, once soft from city living, grew rough with calluses, strong, steady, like any rancher's. Every movement spoke the same truth. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning how to live out here in Wyoming. The days stretched longer, and the work never let up. Cole Maddox taught Ayanna how to ride proper, how to hold the reins, how to read a horse before it ever made a move, how to trust instinct over fear. Every lesson wasn't just about skill. It was about trust. And with every fall, every correction, every small success, something between them grew stronger. At night, the cabin came alive. Laughter filled the space where silence used to live. Ayanna would hum old songs from her childhood, soft melodies that echoed through the wooden walls, blending with the crackle of firelight. Sometimes Cole would join in, quiet at first, like a man remembering how to breathe again. One of the hardest days came when a horse went down, badly injured. Cole worked fast, steady hands doing what needed to be done. Ayanna stayed right beside him, holding bandages, applying salves. At first her hands shook, the old fear creeping back in, but she pushed through it. The need to save that animal burned stronger than anything the city had ever taught her. The ranch had a way of teaching lessons you couldn't learn anywhere else. Patience, endurance, strength. Ayanna learned to watch the animals, to read the flick of an ear, the shift of weight, the tension before a bolt. She learned to move fast when it mattered and stay still when it didn't. Every small victory was a step forward, proof that the fear Silas Kane once planted in her was losing its hold. One morning, Cole found her out by the fences, working alone. She stood there, staring out across the land, the rising sun casting light around her like something almost sacred, strength and fragility, both in the same breath. He didn't say a word, just watched. Because what he was seeing wasn't the same woman who had arrived on his porch. By evening, they'd sit together on the porch, watching the sky shift colors as the sun dropped low. Ayanna would tell stories about her childhood, her family, woven from both joy and pain. And somehow, those stories tied into Cole's own past, stitching together something neither of them had expected. A spring storm hit without warning. They were up on the barn roof when the sky broke open, rain hammering down, wind tearing through the trees. They didn't panic, didn't waste words. Each trusted the other without question, moving in sync to keep their footing, to keep the structure from giving way. When it passed, the ranch was left soaked. Mud, standing water, debris everywhere. They cleaned it together, slipping, stumbling, laughing through it. And in those small, messy moments, something real took root. A home, not just a place. When the Laramie traders came through, new doors opened. Cole handled the deals. Livestock, supplies, everything needed to keep the ranch running. Ayanna watched, learned fast. Too fast. She started weighing goods, judging worth, reading men the same way she read horses. It didn't take long before people noticed. She wasn't just a woman running from something. She was someone building toward something. One night, by the fire, she told Cole things he hadn't known about Silas Kane. The deeper truths. The deals, the threats, the quiet cruelty hidden behind wealth and influence. A life built on corruption, and a system she had seen from the inside. Cole understood something then. Protecting her wasn't enough. He had to stand beside her, help her build a life strong enough that no shadow from the past could ever reach her again. Every choice they made together, every repair, every plan, became something more than survival. It became purpose. Winter had left its marks behind. But spring brought something new. Ayanna started planning improvements, fixing fences, reorganizing the cabin, putting order into the barns. Every task, every change, was a step forward. Not a victim anymore. A partner. One afternoon, while fixing a broken fence line, Cole handed her a rifle. "Go on," he said. "Try it." She hesitated, just for a second. Then she took aim. Learning to shoot wasn't just about defense. It was about trust. And for the first time, she trusted herself. Each clean shot she landed gave her something back. Strength, certainty, ownership over her own life. It reminded her that no one else held that claim anymore. Not Silas Kane, not fear. No one. Out on the range, the animals began to respond to her differently. Wild horses slowed under her voice. Cattle drifted closer at her touch, sensing the calm authority she carried. Cole Maddox watched it all with quiet pride. The same woman who had once trembled at winter's bite, and a man's cruelty now moved through the herd with steady hands and an unshaken spirit. Ayanna started writing letters, not for herself, but for other women like her. Women trapped, silenced, afraid. She shared her story, her scars, her survival. Every word she wrote carried weight. It turned pain into purpose. Proof that resilience wasn't just endurance, it was a way forward. The ranch began to change. What once stood as a lonely stretch of land became something else entirely. A place of learning, a place of refuge. Little ones from the Dustfall folk came by, eager and wide-eyed, learning to read and write inside the cabin while Cole taught them how to ride, how to hold a line, how to stay alive out here. Ayanna told stories of justice, of standing your ground, of never letting fear write your ending. Laughter filled the space that once held silence. Then one day, word came in. Old contacts of Cole sent news. Silas Kane was in trouble back east. Real trouble. Investigations in Chicago. His empire cracking under pressure. And at the center of it all, Ayanna's journal. Every name, every bribe, every secret she carried west had begun to unravel his world. Justice had found its way across the miles. Summer nights settled in with open skies and a kind of peace that felt almost unreal. Cole and Ayanna would sit by the fire, not needing words, just presence, just knowing. Every glance, every quiet moment stitched them closer together, bound not by need, but by what they had survived side by side. Then the fire came. Small, but dangerous enough. A spark in one of the barns that could have taken everything. They moved fast, no hesitation. Water, dirt, bare hands if needed. Together they beat it back before it could spread. Another test, another victory, trust held. What grew between them wasn't built on desperation. It was respect, care, choice. Ayanna never tried to become Eliza Maddox. She honored her memory, while becoming something entirely her own. And Cole, he learned the difference between clinging to the past and choosing what stood in front of him. Love, when it came, wasn't forced. It was chosen. The stories Ayanna shared didn't stay inside those walls. The Dustfall folk listened. Men and women alike learned to recognize danger, to stand against it. And Cole made sure the ranch stayed ready, secure, watchful. What had once been a lonely place became a haven, a refuge. Time changed everything. Every sunrise, every storm, they faced it together. And with each passing day, it became clearer. Survival had only been the beginning. What they were building now was something stronger, something lasting. Summer stretched wide across the land. Long days, open skies, work that never ended. Cole and Ayanna expanded the fences, reinforced the barns, organized supplies with precision. Out here, survival wasn't luck. It was preparation, and they made sure nothing was left to chance. The wild horses came closer now. They trusted her voice, her presence. Cole watched in quiet amazement how a woman shaped by city life had become something else entirely. A rancher in her own right, strong, patient, instinctive. Like the land had always been waiting for her. One afternoon, Cole showed her how to read grazing maps, how to chart patrol routes across the property. The land itself became a tool. Every ridge, every dip, every path a way to stay one step ahead of whatever might come. The little ones kept coming. The cabin filled again. Letters, lessons, voices. Ayanna taught them the alphabet, but more than that. She taught them courage. Cole stood back sometimes, watching it all unfold, seeing his home turn into something bigger than he'd ever imagined. Then came another visitor, from Laramie traders, bringing fresh news. Silas Kane's world was collapsing, investigations spreading across states. His name no longer carried weight, it carried suspicion. Everything Ayanna had written down was doing its work. Slow, relentless, unstoppable. But they didn't get careless. Cole and Ayanna prepared, reinforced defenses, trained the horses harder, stocked weapons, mapped escape routes, planned for anything, because a man like Silas didn't fall quietly. Every move they made was deliberate, every step. Survival. Ayanna began writing again, this time a new journal, not just of pain, but of everything they were building, every fight, every lesson, every victory, a record that couldn't be erased, a map of resistance. Then the storm hit, sudden, violent. Rain hammered down, wind tore across the barn, hail striking like gunfire. Cole held steady while Ayanna secured what she could, both moving without panic. Because out here, you either adapted or you lost everything. And together, they held their ground. The cattle responded to Ayanna's calm like it was something they could trust. Even under pressure, they followed her lead without hesitation. Cole Maddox watched it with quiet admiration, the way she stayed steady, handling danger with a blend of instinct and hard-earned skill that made her movements precise, controlled, and sure. At night, the cabin glowed with lamplight and fire. Ayanna would teach Cole songs from her childhood, simple tunes and old games carried from another life, while the wind howled outside like it always did across Wyoming. Every night felt like a reminder. Life was fragile, yes, but it could still be shared, still be good. One day, while they were out driving the herd, they found tracks. Fresh. Someone had been near the corral. Cole and Ayanna followed them in silence, both knowing what it could mean. Silas Kane wasn't the kind of man to let things go. Every sign, every mark in the dirt sharpened their awareness. Out here, you stayed ready, or you didn't last? Word began to spread. The Dustfall folk started looking at Ayanna differently. Not with pity, but with respect, with something close to admiration. Her skills grew by the day, and her confidence carried over to others. Men and women alike began to understand. Strength wasn't just violence. It was clarity, courage, will. Cole worked the fences while Ayanna handled supplies. They talked through everything, plans, risks, decisions. No secrets, no hesitation. They learned to trust each other fully. Because out here, that kind of trust meant the difference between living and dying. The frontier didn't forgive mistakes. Then a messenger rode in from Chicago. More news about Silas Kane. His businesses were crumbling, charges stacking up. Everything Ayanna had written, every truth she carried west, was turning into consequences. Real ones, the kind that couldn't be bought away. Justice was catching up. One summer night, sitting out on the porch, Ayanna spoke about her life before Silas. Dreams she had buried, hopes she had forgotten. It wasn't just survival that made her strong. It was remembering who she had been before fear took hold. Cole listened and understood. He trained her harder after that. Sharper shooting, faster reactions, real scenarios. Not just for defense, but readiness. Because if Silas, or anyone else, came back, they wouldn't be caught off guard. Preparation became everything. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Work, training, rest. Ayanna and Cole learned to read the land itself. The sky, the animals, the wind. Out here, survival wasn't luck. It was awareness, discipline. A small fire broke out in one of the barns. They handled it fast. No panic, no wasted movement. Water, dirt, coordination. It was over before it could spread. Another test passed. Another reminder. Calm and precision mattered more than strength alone. What they had between them deepened. It wasn't built on need anymore. It was built on respect, care, understanding. Ayanna didn't try to replace Eliza Maddox. She honored her, while becoming someone entirely her own. And Cole, he finally understood what real love meant. Not control, not possession, but standing beside someone, protecting, sharing. Neighbors started coming by, looking for advice, for help. The ranch became more than a home. It became a refuge. Ayanna taught them how to recognize danger, how to break free from manipulation. Cole strengthened the land, building defenses, making sure no one under his watch would be left exposed again. One afternoon, while checking the fences, they noticed movement. Someone watching from a distance. The threat hadn't disappeared. Silas Kane still lingered like a shadow, and they both knew it. Freedom wasn't guaranteed. Not yet. Not ever. It had to be guarded. Ayanna began training the Dustfall folk. Basic defense, awareness, survival. Every lesson mattered. Every person stronger meant the whole community stood firmer. The ranch wasn't just a place anymore. It was a line drawn in the dirt. The days filled with work, planning, preparing, living. Cole and Ayanna learned how to balance it all, defending what they had while building something beyond fear. Finding small moments of peace between long stretches of vigilance. One evening, under a sky painted gold and red, they walked the land together. Every fence repaired, every tree planted, every mark of effort told a story, of resilience, of refusal to break. What had once been empty had become something real. A home. Summer pushed on, and with it came a growing sense of strength. Not false safety, but earned stability. They knew Silas might try again. But if he did, he wouldn't find the same people. At dawn, the cold cut sharp through the air. They didn't hesitate. They rode the boundaries of the ranch, checking every gate, every lock, every weapon, because they both knew. Silas Kane wouldn't stop until he tried to take control again. And they wouldn't let him. Ayanna checked supplies inside while Cole secured the windows and doors. The wind carried distant sounds across the plains, a reminder that even out here, they weren't invisible. Every move they made was deliberate, careful, strong. The Dustfall folk kept coming, kept learning. Ayanna taught with patience. How to see danger before it struck, how to defend a home, how to stand their ground. What she had lived through became knowledge, and that knowledge became power. And little by little, the fear that once followed her began to fade. A shadow moved along the far edge of the corral just as Cole Maddox was making his rounds. Silas Kane came into view, riding slow, flanked by 2 armed men. The air tightened instantly. Silence stretched thin, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath hooves, a warning that trouble had arrived. Cole stepped beside Ayanna without a word, eyes scanning the ground, the angles, the distance. Every second mattered now. You could feel it in your skin. The pressure building, the air turning heavy. Even the land seemed to hold still, like the frontier itself knew what was about to unfold. Ayanna raised the Colt, steady in her grip, her gaze locked on Silas, her lips pressed tight, but her stance didn't waver. There was no fear left in her eyes, only resolve. She wasn't going back, not to him, not to that life, not ever again. Silas pulled his horse to a stop a few yards away, wearing a smile that barely masked the anger beneath it. He spoke smooth, controlled, leaning on that same old authority, money, law, influence. But Cole didn't move. Out here, the law wasn't written on paper. It was decided by the ones willing to stand their ground. One of the Kane riders shifted forward, uncertain, stepping where he shouldn't. Cole didn't hesitate. The Winchester cracked into the air, The sound rolled across the valley like thunder, sharp and final. A warning, a reminder. Out here, arrogance could get a man killed. Ayanna stepped forward then, matching the moment. She was ready. Silas frowned, caught off guard. The woman he thought he owned, the one he thought he'd broken, stood in front of him now with steel in her hand and fire in her eyes. Every second that passed made it clearer. He had misjudged her. Badly. The tension held as all of them measured the distance between life and death. Cole and Ayanna stood firm, each in position, knowing one mistake could end everything. The frontier had a way of teaching that courage meant nothing without discipline. Silas tried another tactic. He pulled out papers, legal claims, forged authority, threats dressed as law. His voice stayed steady, but it carried less weight now. Cole didn't even blink. Ayanna lifted the journal. That same leather book, the one filled with truth, every crime, every bribe, every threat Silas Kane had ever tried to bury. She held it high for all to see. "This is who you are," she said, her voice cutting clean through the cold air. The ground fell quiet again. Then, gunfire echoed nearby. A startled animal burst from the brush, crashing through snow and branches. The moment snapped tight again, reminding every man standing there just how thin the line was. Ayanna adjusted her stance, ready. Silas didn't realize it yet, but he was cornered. His arrogance had blinded him. He trusted too much in power, in wealth, never thinking the woman he tried to control would outthink him, outlast him. With every passing second, his position weakened. The frontier wasn't built for men like him. Cole stayed calm, breathing slow, watching every move. Ayanna stood beside him, her grip firm on the pistol, her mind working through every possible outcome, how to end this without risking the lives behind her. The Kane riders began to hesitate. They saw it now. The coordination, the control, the quiet strength between Cole and Ayanna. No threat, no bluff could shake what stood in front of them. One wrong move, and it would be over. Silas made one last attempt. He stepped forward toward Ayanna, trying to reclaim control through force. Cole fired again. This time the bullet struck the ground just inches from Silas's boots. That was enough. He stopped. Violence without strategy meant nothing out here. Ayanna took her chance. Her voice rang out, clear, steady, undeniable. She named his crimes, his threats, his lies. Each word landed like a verdict. No one spoke, no one moved, because the truth was standing right there in front of them. And it wasn't something Silas Kane could buy his way out of. The Kane riders glanced at one another, measuring the ground beneath them, weighing the risk. Grant Harker stayed back, watchful, saying nothing, but seeing everything. He knew better than most that written law didn't always hold out here. On the frontier, justice often came from grit and resolve, not stamped paper. And Silas Kane finally understood. Defeat settled over him slow and heavy. His face shifted. Shock first, then anger, and finally something colder, acceptance. Every move he'd made to regain control had only exposed him further, stripped him bare, his money, his influence. It meant nothing here. It couldn't buy loyalty. It couldn't take Ayanna's freedom back. Cole Maddox slowly lowered the barrel of his rifle, never breaking eye contact. Beside him, Ayanna eased her grip on the Colt, lowering it just enough. But her eyes stayed sharp. The danger had passed, but the message remained. Out here, freedom wasn't given. It was defended, with clarity, with courage, never with fear. The afternoon light softened, washing the snow in shades of gold and amber. Cole and Ayanna walked the ranch together, checking every corner, every fence, every line. Each step reminded them they had held their ground. They had protected what was theirs. And what they were building was worth every risk. The sun dipped behind the mountains, and the cabin came alive with lamplight and fire. They sat together in the quiet, not needing words, just the weight of what they had faced and overcome. The peace was fragile, but it was real. The cattle grazed easy. The horses drifted close to Ayanna, trusting her without hesitation. Cole watched it all, remembering the woman who had once arrived broken, afraid, and seeing now someone who could lead, protect, and teach. The ranch wasn't empty anymore. It had become something stronger. That night, under a rising Wyoming moon, Ayanna wrote in her journal. Every word she set down was a record of truth, of courage, of a fight that refused to be erased. Silas Kane could take many things, but not her story, not her freedom. Calm returned to the ranch little by little after that confrontation, but neither of them forgot. It wouldn't last forever. Out here, peace was something you guarded. Every day, they worked side by side, repairing fences, restoring order, setting things right. Ayanna began reshaping the cabin, turning it into something warmer, more lived in. She added shelves, organized tools, left her mark in every corner. Cole watched quietly as she blended pieces of her past with the demands of the land, creating something that felt like both survival and home. The animals responded to her more with each passing day. Horses approached without fear. Cattle followed her lead with ease. It wasn't force, it was trust. And Cole understood that now. The bond between man and animal was built the same way as anything else out here, with patience, with consistency, with respect. Each morning, he pushed her further. Advanced riding, harder terrain, faster reactions, and she met every challenge head-on. The woman who once flinched at the cold and violence now rode with balance, confidence, and control, ready for whatever came next. Ayanna didn't keep that strength to herself. People started coming. Men, women, young ones from the Dustfall folk. They gathered at the cabin, learning how to defend themselves, how to survive. She taught them what she knew: strategy, awareness, courage, because real strength was built, not given. One day, a rider came in with fresh news. Investigations into Silas Kane were tightening. His businesses were collapsing. His reputation ruined. Everything Ayanna had carried with her, every truth written down, was catching up to him. Justice had a long reach, even from Wyoming. And as the quiet settled deeper over the ranch, it became clear. This time, it wasn't going anywhere. Every evening, Cole Maddox and Ayanna rode the outer edges of the ranch, checking every boundary, every weak point, making sure nothing was left exposed. Each pass sharpened their awareness, each detail a reminder that freedom out here wasn't given. It was guarded with discipline, vigilance, and foresight. Spring pushed forward, and with it, the land came alive. Ayanna planted small gardens, teaching the little ones how to tend soil, how to care for life from the ground up. Cole handled the herd, steady as ever. Their days blended into something more than routine. It was survival, teaching, and building a life that meant something. One night, as the fire cracked softly in the hearth, Ayanna spoke about her past, before Silas Kane. She talked about dreams she'd buried, moments of joy she'd nearly forgotten. And in her voice, Cole heard something deeper. Strength wasn't just about surviving. It was about remembering who you were before the world tried to break you. They began planning more. Stronger fences, reinforced barns, better watch routes. Every decision made together, every step taken side by side. Their trust wasn't spoken. It was lived. Then one day, while Cole worked a fence line, Ayanna found tracks. Someone had been watching. The threat hadn't vanished. Silas Kane's shadow still lingered, a reminder that freedom could slip away if they let their guard down. Out here, one mistake could cost everything. So they adapted. Ayanna taught Cole new ways to watch the land. Signals, lookout points, escape paths. Every lesson built on the last. They learned that defense wasn't just strength. It was awareness, planning, and thinking ahead. And intelligence always beat brute force. The Dustfall folk kept coming. The cabin turned into something more, a place where knowledge passed hands, where survival wasn't guesswork. People came for advice, for guidance, for strength, and slowly, the influence of Cole and Ayanna spread. Not through fear, through example. Then came another test. A small fire broke out in a nearby shed. It could have spread fast, but they moved quicker, coordinated, calm, focused. They saved the animals, contained the flames. Another lesson learned. Preparation mattered. So did control under pressure. Ayanna began training the others more directly. Men, women, anyone willing to learn. She showed them how to spot danger early, how to defend what was theirs, how to act without hesitation. Every lesson was practical. Every moment counted. The days filled with work, hard, honest, relentless, training, planning, building. But somewhere in between it all, they found balance. They learned how to defend what they had while still living beyond fear. Every improvement, every success, proved the same thing. Adversity didn't have to break you. It could build you. One afternoon, they walked the ranch again, checking fences, watching the herd. Every post set, every structure raised, it all stood as proof of what they'd built together. Not just land, but something stronger. Their bond grew with it, rooted in respect, trust, and care. Ayanna wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was carving out her own place, her own future. And Cole understood now. Real love didn't control. It supported. It protected. It stood beside. The little ones and neighbors started helping more, learning the land, learning the work. Through action, Ayanna and Cole showed them what mattered. Courage, responsibility, self-reliance. Out here, that meant everything. One summer afternoon, while checking the corral, they spotted movement in the distance. Something wasn't right. Silas Kane's presence still lingered like a storm waiting to break. But this time, it didn't carry the same weight. Because they were ready. Their routine, work, teaching, defense, had turned into something unshakable. Every step they took, every choice they made, ensured one thing. If trouble came again, it wouldn't find them unprepared. Ayanna kept writing. Page after page, she recorded everything, events, lessons, the hard truths of survival. Her journal became more than memory. It became a guide, something that could outlive her, something that would teach others long after she was gone. Pain turned into knowledge. Fear turned into purpose. The ranch stood stronger because of it. Every fence raised, every routine set, every lesson passed on. It all built something steady, something real. Cole Maddox and Ayanna proved that resilience, when paired with preparation, could hold back even the harshest edge of Wyoming. At night, the fire lit the cabin in warm gold. They shared quiet moments, sometimes words, sometimes silence. Laughter, memories. Every breath of peace felt earned, hard-won, and every glance between them carried the same truth. They had faced it all, and they had endured. Spring leaned into summer, bringing long days and clear skies. They didn't waste a second, strengthening the ranch, teaching, training, locking in the life they had fought for. Every action pulled them closer. Every step made their home stronger. Life out here wasn't just survival anymore. It was something full, something brave. Then, the window creaked open. Soft, but in the stillness of the night, it cracked like thunder. Both of them froze, listening. No footsteps, no voices, just the wind dragging through dry grass outside. Far from the ranch, Colt Hayes moved first, helping Kiona slip through the window before climbing in after her. The office smelled of old leather and stale tobacco. Moonlight spilled across a heavy desk, shelves packed tight with papers and ledgers. "The account book," Colt whispered. "What does it look like?" Kiona murmured back. Jeb Carter said brown leather, locked in the desk drawer. Colt stepped closer, slow and careful. The drawer was locked. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a thin piece of metal, and worked it into the keyhole. Kiona stayed by the door, watching. Ready. The lock clicked. Soft. Colt eased the drawer open. There it was, a leather-bound book. He pulled it out, flipping it open at random. Even in the dim light, the numbers told a story clear as day. Real debts buried under false income, hidden entries, lies stacked on lies. A man unraveling. The floor creaked in the hallway. Both of them froze. Footsteps, heavy, certain. Someone knew. The door burst open. Lamplight flooded the room. Brock Hale stood in the doorway, Duke Rourke beside him, rifle aimed straight at Colt's chest. Brock didn't look surprised. He looked pleased. "I was wondering how long it'd take you to do something this stupid," Brock said calmly. "Jeb came to me soon as you left. Told me everything." He smiled faintly. "Kid's weak, but he knows where his loyalty lies." Kiona felt the words hit like a punch. Brock's eyes dropped to the ledger in Colt's hands. "You're holding my property," he said. "That's theft. Breaking into my place? That's trespassing." He stepped forward, slow, deliberate, like a man walking toward a kill. "You're right," he added coldly. "This ends here." He drew his revolver. "This is how it goes. You two, tragic accident out in the hills. Maybe you fought back." His voice stayed smooth, controlled. "When they find your bodies, it'll all make sense." Colt's hand drifted slowly toward his gun. "People saw us together today," he said. "They'll know." Brock let out a quiet chuckle. "They'll say you were some drifter trying to protect a thief, and paid the price. And just like that?" The air went dead still. Brock Hale made one mistake. He focused on Colt Hayes and forgot about Kiona. He underestimated her. That was enough. Kiona moved fast, lunging toward the lamp and striking it hard. Oil spilled across the desk, and flames burst to life in an instant. Fire spread wild and hungry, throwing chaos across the room in flickering light. Duke Rourke flinched. Just for a second. The rifle shifted. That was all Colt needed. He surged forward, grabbing the barrel and wrenching it upward. The shot exploded, blasting into the ceiling. Wood splintered. Smoke filled the air. At the same time, Kiona threw herself at Brock. They hit the floor hard. The revolver flew loose, skidding away. She drove her knee into his gut, knocking the breath from him. Colt struggled with Duke, the two crashing into a shelf. Books and papers scattered, falling like ash around them. The fire climbed higher. It caught the curtains. "Enough!" The voice cut through everything, sharp, commanding. Everything froze. Marshal Wade Granger stood in the doorway, revolver drawn. Behind him, Jeb Carter hovered, pale and shaking. "Everybody on the ground. Now." Slowly, Colt released the rifle. Duke stepped back. Kiona pulled away from Brock, who lay gasping on the floor. "Thank God you're here," Brock rasped. "These two broke in, tried to rob me." "That's not what I heard," the marshal replied coldly. "Jeb says you moved the cattle and tried to pin it on her." His eyes dropped to the ledger, half burning on the desk. "This book says something different." Colt lunged forward, grabbing it from the flames before it could be lost, and handed it over. Marshal Wade Granger flipped through the pages fast, his face hardened with every line. "Brock Hale," he said, voice low and final. "You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder." He turned his gaze. "Duke Rourke. You too." Brock staggered to his feet, fury taking over. "I'm a respected man," he shouted. "I built this town. You're going to believe a savage and some drifter over me?" "I believe evidence," the marshal answered. Brock moved. Quick. Too quick. As he passed Kiona, his hand shot for the revolver again. She saw it, reacted. She shoved Colt aside with everything she had. The gun fired. Pain ripped through her shoulder, hot, sharp. The bullet tore flesh but didn't drop her. 2 shots rang out. The marshal's. Brock fell, screaming, a wound tearing through his leg. "Enough!" the marshal roared. No one moved. The fire began to die down, smoke thick in the air, heavy with the scent of burned wood. Men rushed in from outside with buckets, throwing water, smothering the last of the flames. Colt was at Kiona's side in an instant. His hands shook as he pressed cloth against her wound. "You hit?" he asked, voice tight. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice trembled. "You're alive because of you," Colt said. She let out a weak breath. "And you're alive because of me." Their eyes met. Through smoke, blood, and ruin, they had saved each other. Marshal Wade Granger bound Brock's hands tight. Outside, the town was waking up to the truth. A scandal that would drag names through the dirt, tear down reputations, and break the silence that had hidden everything. The monster wasn't a monster after all. It was a woman who refused to break, a cowboy who dared to look deeper, and a town that would never sleep easy again. Kiona looked at Colt one last time, standing there in the smoke and the taste of freedom. And for the first time in years, she wasn't alone.